Are you ready?
Activate.
Sequence start 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, ignition.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Shadows in the Dark, where the darkness is illuminated. I am your host, Jeremiah Greer, and tonight we're going to have a great show, a very, very interesting show. We're going to be welcoming one of our favorite guests of all time, Dr. Gary Frick. And, if you've missed any previous shows with Dr. Frick, then you're in for a treat tonight because Dr. Frick has said that Michael Jackson has made contact with him. So we're going to get into exactly, what has been said in this contact, what kind of messages Michael has for the world now that he has passed on, as well as some other aspects. It's going to be a very, very interesting show. I'm really excited about this one, to be honest, so this is going to be a lot of fun. Also, excuse me, I want to personally thank the few that have put in to volunteer to help Shadows in the Dark right now. We have kind of put a call out to our dedicated listeners to give us a hand with some things, mainly the moderating the forum and posting up some events, as well as helping out with the show reminders, which if you are signed up for the show reminders, hopefully you received one tonight. I am not sure. We kind of changed programs that when we send that out on, and I'm not sure how well it is sending it to certain email addresses, but hopefully you did receive that. If you are not signed up for our show reminder, then if you look over to the left-hand side, you'll see something that says show reminder. Just fill out that little form, hit subscribe, and you'll receive an email confirmation. Just click on that, and you are good to go. So, if you don't want to miss the show or you want to be reminded, there you go. We try to send them out 3 hours ahead of time. I think I was a little late this time. I think it was about 2 hours ahead of time. But there you go. I mean, it's a simple thing. We don't share this information with anybody, so if you'd like to, like I say, be reminded of the shows as they happen, then please sign up for that. Now, we only send out the reminders for the live shows. If we do a rebroadcast, we won't send out any reminders for that. Pretty much, Shadows in the Dark is going to be playing right here every Sunday and Thursday at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time, regardless if it's live or if it's a rebroadcast. But we do like to remind you of the live shows. So make sure to do that. But kind of also back to what I was started to say before I got off on the show reminders is, appreciation for those who have filled out the volunteer form. Thank you so much for doing so. And we still want to encourage anyone else to do this because we do need some help. I mean, we have you can sign up to help as a forum moderator, as a newsletter admin, and also news stories. It is very difficult to keep fresh news stories up every day on the website all by myself, and if someone wants to help with that, I would definitely love for that to happen. Of course, we want kind of a few people helping with each thing, so that's kind of the goal. So not one person is looking up news stories every single day. We want to spread it out, get quite a few people kind of helping get this information together. Well, and some of you may be asking, well, how do I volunteer? Well, it's very simple. All you need to do is go up to the top of the menu there where it says Contact. When you mouse over the Contact, you'll see three things. Suggest no, I apologize. Go to the home page. That's where it's at. On the home page, you will see a section that says "Be a part of the show." Well, that's where you click. Click the Read More, and that will take you to the volunteer form. Now, back to the contact form. There you see where you can suggest a guest, request to be a guest if you would like to be a guest on Shadows in the Dark, and also, if you've been keeping an eye on the poll, we'd love for anyone to give us feedback on exactly what they think about the website or anything else going on at Shadows in the Dark. Well, you can do that through the feedback. Again, that's contact, and then you'll see the feedback link there. Just click on it, and it'll take you to the feedback form. So we want to encourage anyone to do that. Well, I tell you what, I mean, this is going to be a fun show tonight. And I apologize, I really don't have any stories, news stories at this moment. Sorry, we had someone having a little bit of a problem there in the chat to get the sound going. So it seems like everything's good there. But, because, I really want to get into tonight's show. And we've got our segment, our first little break here is a little bit longer than normal because we're going to play a couple Michael Jackson songs tonight. Of course, you can't do a show on Michael Jackson unless you play a Michael Jackson song. So we've got two tonight, one during the first break and one during the second break. So we're going to get to that here in just a second. But, again, it's going to be a great show. Again, if you want to volunteer, please do so or give us some feedback. We really want to know what you think and what we can do to make the site even better. We have had a few people that have said it's just all right. Well, we want to know, why is it just all right? What is it that doesn't make it great? That's what we want to check out. So, all right, well, we're going to get into this show tonight, so let's take our first little break here. Like I said, we are going to have a Michael Jackson song during it, and we're going to come back, and we'll be talking with our guest, Dr. Gary Frick. So stay tuned. This is going to be a fun and wonderful show.
Visit www.shadowsinthedarkradio.com today to sign up for our free newsletter, join as a member of our forum, or browse our online store where you can find books, CDs, and DVDs, like a signed copy of The President's Vampire by Robert Damon Schneck, or the complete works of Dr. Gary Frick for only $20. That's 4 books signed by Dr. Frick that carry a great message. You will also find downloadable products like Mysteries Magazine and the Donald Kehoe interviews, DVDs featuring Charlie Carlson and Mr. Lobo. So go to www.shadowsinthedarkradio.com today and be a part of the show.
Well, tonight we're going to be talking with Dr. Gary Frick. If you're a regular of the show, then you have definitely heard Gary on our show. But tonight's a little special. At least I'm considering a little special as, with Gary on the show, we have talked about many past famous people. But we have, Gary is saying that Michael Jackson, a recent death, has made contact with him. And we're going to discuss that tonight. We're going to get a lot of aspects of Michael's life and death. So, Gary, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you back on.
Thank you very much.
You are welcome. And I want to address something right fast. There was a thing in the chat that said, mystery, what does Jeremiah do while on the break? Well, I talk to the guest. So
Yes, he does talk to us. And anyway, I want you to know I'm very excited about this show. It happened to have an opening, and I don't now. The listeners, should I assume that most of the listeners have heard me before, or should I know at least a few of them haven't either read my books or heard me on the radio show. What approach should I take here?
Well, I say you've been on many, many times, and if they want to hear more from you, they can definitely dig in the archives. And well, as soon as we get most of the archives back up, let me put that. But I mean, you can give a basic. Let's go ahead and give a basic introduction to yourself, and and tell us why you've been on Shadows in the Dark as many times as you have. As a matter of fact, quite a bit.
My name is Dr. Frick. I'm a psychiatrist. I'm also a medium. I've been communicating with spirits for years, and that's the reason I've been on Jeremiah's show. Once again, I've been doing this for many years. I've been communicating with archangels, people who have passed over into the afterlife. Some of those people have been famous during their earth lives, but a lot of them haven't been. Well, there are a lot of Joe Schmoes that pass over into the afterlife, and they've communicated with me too. Mm-hmm. There are some beings in the afterlife who never even incarnated on Earth, so we can't even really call it the afterlife. It's the fourth or fifth dimension we're talking about. And it does just so happen. It's interesting, Robert Schneck, who's also a regular on your show, the day after Michael Jackson died, he said to me, "So what do you think? Is Michael Jackson going to communicate with you, Dr. Frick?" And I said to him, this was in the chat room, I said, well, it's not really my decision. I don't really choose who writes through me or who communicates through me. I said, I would need his permission first, and wherever Michael Jackson is, not only will I need his permission, but he may need permission to write through me too. Because wherever he is, he works with the angels too, and with God, and we're all part of one big master, what you call a master plan. We're all connected on some level, whichever way you want to look at it. And so, Michael, believe it or not, whatever you saw in Jeremiah's advertisement is true. And I really liked the advertisement in your website, Jeremiah. There was a picture of me, and there was a picture of the clouds, and a dim version, a dim picture of Michael Jackson, as if he was communicating to me from the spirit world, and that is in fact what happened. And my next book, Is There Music in the Afterlife, is going to be released in a few months, and these chapters that Michael Jackson wrote through me, 20 handwritten pages, which will be typed obviously, they're going to be in my next book, and I figured, wait a minute, why wait until my next book is released? Now people are thinking about Michael Jackson. He just died, he just had his funeral. Why not have go on the radio show now? And I'm very pleased that tonight's show was open.
Yeah, me too. I mean, it just by chance, and I was telling you, I was actually in the process of kind of trying to get this booked and waiting for a reply, and you contacted me, so you beat him to the punch, I guess. So it worked out great, but also wonderful to hear, because I've been anticipating your newest book, Is There Music in the Afterlife, because I'm a huge music fan of all kinds of genres of music, and I think this is definitely a chapter that will fit into it. I mean, Michael Jackson, probably in many people's eyes, the greatest musician, singer that has stepped on the planet thus far.
Yes, actually, my feeling about the matter is I was born in 1965, and I remember Elvis's death. I was 12 years old. I remember that well. I remember my friend and I sitting right near the pool, hearing the news on our transistor radio, and I remember John Lennon's death. And obviously there's Princess Diana's death. In my lifetime, I could only think of 3 deaths that generated as much hype and caused as much grief, or whatever you want to call it, as Michael Jackson's. And even Elvis's. Elvis was, in a sense, more of a delayed reaction. I remember, 70,000 people were gathered in the streets of Memphis when Elvis died. I mean, it was a big deal. But I don't remember it being as big of a deal as Michael Jackson. It could be because they didn't have CNN back then. They didn't have YouTube. John Lennon's death was really big because it represented, it symbolized to people the end of an era. A lot of like hippies and flower children saw that the their time has passed, and we're moving on to a new era. In fact, I was just talking to a psychic and a medium last week who's every bit as much of a psychic as I am, and she said that she really does feel a little something's been missing since the 1960s and 1970s. A little, it's kind of intangible. It has to do with global consciousness and higher consciousness. But so John Lennon's death was big, and then there was Princess Diana, who wasn't an entertainer. But and you know, one thing I remember about Elvis and John Lennon is people knew that they were great even before they died.
Right.
With Michael Jackson, we all knew he was great, but all of a sudden after he died, he had such longevity. We pieced all the work he's done over his life with the Jackson 5. And do you all realize that if Michael Jackson had died at 13 instead of 50, he still could have gone down in history as one of the great ones?
Oh, yeah.
Because Motown, I mean, we're talking James Brown, Diana Ross and the Supremes, Marvin Gaye, Stevie Wonder. I mean, I believe people will be listening to Motown 100, maybe 1,000 years from now. It's some of the best music ever made. It's up there with Beethoven and the Beatles. And Michael Jackson was, even as a kid, he was one of the great Motown artists. And Elvis and John Lennon came on the scene when they were in their 20s. So, I mean, when I look back at Michael Jackson's career, I think one of the reasons why his death was difficult for many of us is because, somehow right after he died, we looked back at his whole life and we said, wow, this is remarkable. And also I like the way his work evolved. Maybe he did peak with his Thriller album, I'd say, as far as being a pop star is concerned. But as with the Beatles, he kind of started out as a pop star, and then his work started having more and more spiritual messages and messages on global consciousness. And as we were talking about before I came on the air, I mean, Michael Jackson's messages were very similar to mine. I use a different medium. I'm an author. I have 6 books, actually. Is Their Music in the Afterlife will be my 6th one. And I've been on radio, so my message is basically the same. We can't go through our lives thinking that the entire world revolves around our society. Our society is very important to God. Each of us is important to God, but a farmer in China or a starving child in Africa is just as important to God as we are. And Michael Jackson, I know, would very much relate to what I'm saying.
Well, let's kind of get into his life first, because it was an amazing life. You pointed out, I mean, starting at a very young age. And I think maybe, that even plays a part in why this has affected so many people, because he has had fans for almost, 40 years. 40 years worth of fans from a young child to middle age. He's been an entertainer and a very successful one. So, he has had fans that's grown up with him, fans that have come, especially with the Thriller album. Me being my age, that's, I was, very young at that time when Thriller came out. I remember watching MTV, seeing the videos for Thriller, Bad, Beat It, all those. Billie Jean, one of his most successful songs. So let's get into talking about his life and how successful it was, what kind of, the impact he has made on the world. And of course, you can't talk about his life without getting into also a little bit of bizarre side of his life that started coming, later on as well.
Yes. Well, let me ask you a question, Jeremiah. Approximately how old were you in 1984?
In 84, I was 7 years old, so I was really starting to get my taste of music for me.
Okay, you were starting, because you know what my mother tells me about Elvis? She says, Gary, you had to be there. As great as Elvis is now, if you lived through it, there was something about him. He really stood out. In fact, we play Elvis music sometimes. I work on an inpatient unit in the morning, and my elderly patients, we play Elvis music for them sometimes, and we'll see them crying. These are people with Alzheimer's disease. It's like not only did it bring back memories of their youth, but a big part of their youth, Elvis Presley. And Michael Jackson, I mean, you really had to be there. For those of you younger folks out there, let me give you an idea of how big Michael Jackson was in 1984. He visited the White House. This is when Ronald Reagan was president, and people were starstruck. And when I say people, I'm talking about like people in his cabinet, his secretaries, perhaps even the president himself. In fact, one person was even quoted as saying, "I saw his glove. There he is." You know.
Yeah.
And this is one of the most popular presidents of our time, and yet Michael Jackson, as far as popular culture is concerned, blew him away. He was really big. I remember growing up. I remember my sister having a Michael Jackson poster on her wall. She's 7 years younger than me. She was about 11 or 12 years old, and I remember the girls at school, high school and college, going gaga over Michael Jackson, and yeah.
Well, I had the red leather zipper jacket. I had one. You know, everybody did.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you. Well, my story was, I remember in my college dorm, I would play Thriller over and over, and my roommate would say, "Enough Michael Jackson, okay?" And but some of the people in my dorm, they were big Michael Jackson. I mean, every fraternity party you'd go to, I remember Thriller would be playing, Billie Jean. I was pleased to see how, in his own way, his music actually evolved over the years. If you look at things spiritually, you know, heal the world. Well, what's kind of funny though is I know my favorite Michael Jackson songs aren't necessarily other people's Michael Jackson songs. I don't know how you all feel about Heal the World. It's partly because I think a lot about world peace and global consciousness. That song and Man in the Mirror and We Are the World are really dear to my heart. And one thing I'm learning, one of my other favorite songs on Michael Jackson, by the way, this was before Thriller. He had a lot of good stuff before Thriller.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite songs is She's Out of My Life. Most people say that song is too whiny, but to me, I think it's heartfelt, and it's a really emotionally charged song, and maybe that's one of the reasons I became a psychiatrist. I appreciate that sort of outpouring of emotion. And I actually, on my Facebook wall, I actually have a videotape of that song, and these women in Romania are screaming, and one of them had to be carried away by a security guard. It was like a Beatles concert. But anyway, just reminiscing here, you know, it's interesting. I've talked to you plenty of times without the radio on. Sometimes when I'm on your show, I forget that other people are listening too. Just reminiscing, you know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he affected a lot of people's lives. I mean, he was, you know, a superstar to millions. And you're right, his music did evolve. You know, here over the last bit of his career, there was a lot more songs about this world peace. You know, that color doesn't matter. I know we were talking kind of about that on the break in some of his songs. I mean, he was really an advocate for world peace, and I think a lot of people were drawn to that because that's what his music was really representing, and it's a very powerful music. I mean, you can't. We're not saying just the music, but I mean his singing talents. I mean, he was a phenomenal singer, just such a smooth, just very easy voice to listen to.
Yeah, nothing like, and then, I mean, I've been listening to, like most of us, I've been listening to more Jackson 5 music now that he's passed, and then other songs he did after that, Ben, and what's that other one? Well, there's a bunch of them, but yeah, he had a great voice. He could really dance and everything when he was a kid, and as an adult, yeah, I just. And there's something about him. After he died, we appreciate him a lot more. And I guess that kind of part of it might be because of his personal life. And the other part, as I said before, when a person has been around for so long, it's easy to take them for granted.
Yeah, that's very true. You can, and I think that is kind of part of what we're seeing is, many have taken him for granted. And, I think at this point at his death, I think many have also put behind kind of that bizarre stage that he kind of finished his life out with. There was accusations, there was, just the strangeness, the plastic surgeries, all kinds of stuff that really caused a lot of people to kind of give a weird look at him. But, his fan base never really went away.
Hey, you want me to put my psychiatrist hat on or my doctor's hat on now and talk a little about Michael Jackson?
Well, let's take a look at Michael Jackson's life. Why, did he kind of become the person that he did? Because it was. There was, some what people would categorize as a bizarre lifestyle in some parts.
Well, I will say, to a certain extent, I could answer that question in one word: drugs.
Right.
Until he was, as far as I know, before Thriller, when he was like 25 years old, it's interesting. What some people consider bizarre behavior may be bizarre, but it doesn't do anybody any harm. Like his plastic surgeries, they don't bother me.
Right.
To me, I think maybe one nose job was enough.
Well, and let me ask on the lines of plastic surgery, can people get addicted to it?
Wow, I wouldn't say addicted's the right word, because technically what addiction means is, for example, you get a tolerance to something. Like, if you drink, right now, if you drink 2 drinks a day, eventually it could get to the point where 2 drinks has no effect on you, then you need 3 drinks, and then you need... Technically, that's what an addiction is, when you need more for the same effect.
Mm-hmm.
So addiction's technically not the right word, but what happens sometimes is people... There's a thing called body dysmorphic disorder. I don't know if Michael Jackson technically had that, but what happens a lot of times with people, and this happens with a lot of normal adolescents, and it happens with adults too, is the person you see in the mirror is, people see you, you have no idea how other people see you. Like, for example, somebody might have a small nose, but when they look in the mirror, they swear they have a big nose, or they think they have cross eyes, but they really don't. Nobody else sees that. There could have been an element of that with him, where he just didn't realize. When he was in his 20s, there was no reason to get any surgery after that, if he even needed surgery at all. He was actually a sex symbol even before the surgery. So it's quite. Yeah.
Well, the surgery came from a broken nose. He broke his nose in a rehearsal, and apparently had to have some reconstructive surgery done to it. And so that's the, the theory or the common thought of what started, the plastic surgery run, I guess. But it was a needed surgery to start with.
Yes, supposedly.
Right.
If you look at his nose, though, before and after, it's not like the surgery repaired his original nose to what it was. He wanted... actually, the joke was in 1984 that he's as pretty as Diana Ross. In fact, he looked a lot like Diana Ross.
Right.
And then there's also the issue, I think people wonder, did he have an eating disorder?
Mm-hmm.
I believe he was like 5'11", 100 or 110 pounds, and for a man especially, that's emaciated. He was really thin. Now, technically, he probably didn't have anorexia, because anorexia would mean that when he looked in the mirror, he saw a fat person, literally. People with anorexia, when they see themselves in the mirror, they actually see themselves as obese, even though other people see them as emaciated. I've never heard any claim that he felt that way about himself. And I don't think he had, as far as I know, he didn't have bulimia. I've seen his list of medications. There was no laxatives there. I had never heard about him vomiting. And besides, people with bulimia are typically normal weight anyway. So I don't think he had the big two eating disorders, but perhaps the drugs over the years, I think that could have affected his, and whatever it was, his perception of the way he looked was somehow distorted because, there was no reason to change the way he looked when he was in his 20s. And he claimed he had vitiligo,
right?
Which I don't know what to say about that. But.
Well, what about, he had said publicly many times that his father abused him, and some of that abuse was towards his appearance, apparently calling him Big Nose or, things along those lines. What kind of effect can that have on a child for later on in their life?
Oh, yeah. No, that could have a big effect. His childhood, needless to say, was not a normal childhood. For one, fame can really, just think people walk up to you as if they already know you and they know very little about you. What makes things complicated, by the way, about fame is, to a certain extent, people do know things about you. This is something that's difficult for adults to deal with. In fact, just an hour ago, I was seeing a special on Marilyn Monroe, and she got famous as an adult, but he was famous as a kid. He reportedly, the groupies would hang out with his brothers. This is when they were the Jackson 5, and when he and his brothers were performing together. And supposedly his father would even get in on the action, and he would actually see it sometimes. This is what I heard. This is allegedly true. And supposedly his father would actually physically discipline the kids if they weren't dancing right. The thing about the beautiful thing about psychoanalysis is that, no matter how rich or famous people are, we are all in the end, we're all very similar. Whether or not he became famous, he would be affected by his childhood, and I wouldn't wish some of the stuff he seemed to go through as a kid on anybody. I think that, and he seemed to have a good relation with his mother. But for those of you out there who are interested in Freudian theory, sometimes having a very nurturing relationship with your mother and a very harsh disciplinarian as a father, that could affect you psychologically as well.
Right, yeah, and apparently he was very, very close with his mother. I guess we could even see that, through the will. As the will came out, that's pretty much where everything went.
And if this doesn't go to his mother, it goes to Diana Ross. How about that?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm talking about his kids.
Yeah. So now, what starting being a celebrity at such a young age, obviously a huge impact on someone's life. Is this? I guess the psychology part of it a good thing or a bad thing? You hear of so many child stars who end up with very rough lives, end up on drugs, alcohol. Is this, of course, now not maybe the same case with Michael Jackson because he continued the success, but maybe not as much as when he peaked with a Thriller. But you see them kind of, fall apart a little bit. You see this with many child stars.
You know what's interesting? I once saw a special on TV where they had it was a get-together of about 20 different child stars. And what's interesting, though, is all of them said that they wouldn't trade it for anything. They're glad that they actually had that experience. And I think one of the things that makes fame difficult, even for adults, once again, never mind kids, that makes it 10 times more complicated, but even for adults, is the tremendous ambivalence a person must have towards it. Because, I mean, let's face it, we live in a world where people could be very cold. They a lot of times only care about themselves. I know in the end everybody has God within them, but and one aspect of human nature is people do not like to be ignored. Generally not. People want to be special. People want to be maybe a little different. People like to be recognized. And so even if somebody, say a child star, what would be a good example? Let's see, name a child star from, somebody from an old TV show, Gary Coleman from Different Strokes.
Right.
I mean, there's a part of him when he walks down the street and somebody says, "Hey, you're the kid from Different Strokes," right? He probably, there's a part of him that likes being recognized. It makes him feel unique, and yet it must be very difficult too. I mean, there's a part of him that wants to let go of that identity totally. There's a part of him that wants to be known as something else. I mean, even and even some child stars that grow up to be successes, let me give you an example. There was you remember the TV show All in the Family?
Yeah.
Well, there was a guy on the show that was called the Meathead.
Mm-hmm.
Rob Reiner, it was the actor. He wasn't a child star there, but when he's now a great director, right?
Right.
And he said, "I could be the best director in the world, and to most people, I'm still the Meathead."
Right. Yeah.
You see what I mean? And same with these child stars. They could be the best. They could win a Nobel Prize, but they're still. If Gary Coleman wins a Nobel Prize, he's still that little kid from Different Strokes. And Michael Jackson, he said he used to cry from loneliness when he was a kid, and his older brothers had, I think, a lot of the fun. I mean, they were older, they were past puberty, so they had all these women throwing themselves at him, and little Michael, he got a lot of the glory because he was the head singer, but without much of the fun.
Right, yeah, exactly. And, I mean, and everybody likes attention. That's why I do the show, which, by the way, you can pick up an autographed picture of Jeremiah Greer in our web store. No, I'm just kidding. But, yeah, I mean, I'm not a celebrity, but you definitely talk about, you hear celebrities, talk about the invasion on their privacy, how tough it is. I mean, you walk out the door, and especially Michael Jackson was affected by this probably more than most people, most celebrities. You couldn't go out your front door without a slew of fans, paparazzi taking pictures, video cameras rolling. It didn't matter wherever he went, there was a mob surrounding him.
And he was a naturally sensitive guy, too. That's another thing. I mean, now more and more in psychiatry, people are realizing that genetics play a role, too. I mean, where he got this quality from, I don't know. But he was a sensitive guy, I think, to sometimes a destructive degree. He was very shy. I believe he was very shy. Mm-hmm. And to have people he didn't know act like he didn't know him, and to be surrounded by the paparazzi. One thing in psychiatry, when you're ambivalent towards something and you have strong feelings both ways, that's when something can be really destructive. And I think fame is that sort of thing, where you don't want to totally let go of it. I mean, let's face it, if Michael Jackson wanted to, when he was 18 or something, he could have just said, "That's it, I'm done. I'm going to go to school and become a doctor or a lawyer or a paranormal radio show, talk show host, any of those." He could have done that, but what happens is, I guess you could say fame is a little like an addiction. Technically it isn't. Technically addictions generally refer to substances or gambling. That could be an addiction too, but I'd say I'm one of a minority of people. A lot of times I hear people say that famous people bring their misery, they should have known what they were getting into when they became famous, or when they started playing music, or when they started trying out for movie roles. I don't totally agree with that. For one, because I'm a spiritual person, I also understand about destiny too, and I could see fame being almost an addiction. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so. And you're right. I mean, people start, these careers in entertainment or whatever, and you don't know what's going to happen with it. You might be, the most famous person on the planet, and then again, some people might not ever care to listen to you. We have that problem with Shadows in the Dark. We can't get anybody to listen, but I mean, it's, I've heard many people say that too, where they knew what they were getting into, but does that still give people the right to invade in your privacy? And I don't agree with that. I don't think so. You're a movie star where you like entertaining people, but you don't like people standing in your window taking pictures as you're trying to get out of the shower. There is a line, and I think having that around you on a daily basis, which Michael Jackson dealt with, and like I say, not just one or two cameras, but hundreds. I mean, just surrounded wherever he went, has got to have a huge impact on your life, and just even maybe a little bit of your stability in life, because at that point it seems to me it would seem kind of chaotic, like you just couldn't ever be stable. Everything was just kind of spinning real fast.
And what I found amazing is, here's another example of how destructive fame could be. In fact, Robin Williams used to say cocaine is God's way of saying you have too much money. What makes it tricky is that doesn't excuse the substance abuse, but still it shows how destructive fame and sometimes fortune could be. Mm-hmm. In Michael Jackson's case, here was a guy. He could basically snap his fingers and get a doctor to do. This is a guy who was paying doctors over $500,000 just to get him prescriptions.
Right.
$500,000 a year. So that's their whole salary. All they have to do is get prescriptions from Michael Jackson. And my guess is he had one doctor that we all know of, but my guess is they're probably going to find that he had more than one. And another thing is how the doctor was able to get all these prescriptions, I don't know. And Demerol, I have a list here, OxyContin, Percocet, these are some heavy-duty medications. And then Diprivan. Now, I've done my homework with Diprivan, and I've asked other doctors, have you ever even heard of Diprivan being given to an outpatient? And they said, no, absolutely not. Diprivan is given to ICU patients who are intubated, and even then, it's given with caution. What happens is they need a nurse almost constantly around them to monitor them, and they need to have a telemetry. This is something that's given during surgery too, but for an outpatient to be given Diprivan, either it was just a tremendous case of poor judgment on the doctor's part, or Michael Jackson pretty much had a hospital room in his own home. Maybe there were nurses there, maybe there was telemetry, maybe it was but I doubt it was to that extent. So when I look at all the medications that Michael Jackson was on, and the fact that he was on Diprivan, you just give a person 1 milliliter more than they're supposed to get, and that could kill them.
Well, Knock is asking, what exactly is Diprivan for?
Diprivan is a sedative. I believe its most common use is if a person is being intubated in the ICU, it's basically to knock them out, put them to sleep, because if they're awake and they're intubated, it would just be too uncomfortable for them. In fact, about 12 or 13 years ago, and this is 12 or 13 years ago, Michael Jackson said to a doctor, just put me out, I want to sleep, put me out, and he gave him Diprivan. This is an anesthetic. This is something that's given in the operating room or the ICU only, and when I just look back at his history and the fact that he was emaciated, it's to be used with caution in people who are emaciated. That means very thin. It's to be used with caution in people on narcotics. He was on the heaviest duty narcotics there is. It's to be used with caution with people on Valium. He was on Valium. It's really a wonder, as I'm just putting on my doctor's hat now, it's really a wonder he lived this long. And by the way, I reviewed his autopsy, and you could find heart attacks on autopsy, and it looks like he did not die of a heart attack. It really looks like it was a drug overdose. I did a year of pathology, by the way, so getting to use those skills the past few minutes.
Now, you can't talk about Michael Jackson without talking about him being accused of child molestation. And I guess with this, being a psychiatrist, can what he experienced as a child and through his life lead to that? Not saying he was guilty or not guilty, innocent. I choose to just stay neutral about it. How does all that play in with this?
Now, I will admit I was distracted by something in the chat room that I think some knock was saying. Now you're saying that you're asking me, does his childhood affect some of the decisions he made as an adult with the child?
Right, with the accusations of child molestation. Can you see that with his troubled childhood, abusive father as being a possibility? There was nothing was ever shown to prove that he did or did not do it. But again, it's something. If you talk about Michael Jackson, it was a huge huge thing that was brought out in his life.
Well, in psychiatry, I guess let me just tell you what the common way of thinking is. Michael Jackson aside for now, let me just talk about the issue in general.
Yeah.
My wife actually works for Department of Children and Families, and she's done hundreds, maybe thousands of investigations on child abuse, including sexual abuse. And it's interesting how times have changed. In the 70s, or I think even in the 80s, if a person was accused of the worst types of sexual abuse, sometimes the penalty would be they would go to group counseling for maybe a year or so, maybe not even, and that's it. They wouldn't go to jail. It would be viewed almost as a mental illness. They go to a group therapy, and when I hear the stories that my wife tells me, I'm amazed that people would get away with those things then. And then somehow in the 1990s and this decade, things have turned around, and there's pretty much almost a zero tolerance policy, which is, I'd say, very good. Unfortunately, there have been people who have been accused of certain things and they didn't happen. Kids will say things for various different reasons. But in psychiatry, the common wisdom now is pretty much there's no excuse for it. No matter what your childhood situation was like, even if you were sexually abused as a child, once you're an adult, you should not be, that sort of thing just should not happen. And you know what? I agree with that. I believe we all have spirits too, and no matter how bad our childhood was, we have a sense of right. We all have something within us, a conscience that tells us right from wrong. And in the end, there's really no excuse for that. But looking at Michael Jackson specifically, at the very least, he showed incredibly poor judgment. And let me tell you why I feel that way. Mm-hmm. In 1993, I think what was happening is he would invite kids, boys, and I think mainly boys, cancer victims who are about, on the average, 11, 12, or 13 years old, to his Neverland Ranch. And that sounds great. I mean, I think that's fantastic. The only thing is, I believe even then he would sleep in the same bed as them.
All right.
And then somebody accused him of something. Perhaps it was something that maybe the parent wanted to make money off of it or something. I don't know exactly what happened. But after that point, he should have known better than to put himself in that situation. I mean, there are so many other things he could have done. For one, he could have... why not just have a few parents come along, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or why sleep in the same bed as the kids, you know? Why not? Or if you want to have a slumber party, go ahead. Just have a few parents there, too. That's all he had to do. And I know that his security guards or the people who worked with him were unhappy about this situation too. And then he was accused again in 2003, and once again, I mean, he was actually in 1993, I believe he had to pay the family $10 million, and then the whole thing kind of went away. But in 2003, you all know about the court case, and my feeling is, I feel that's a boundary violation. I do not feel that adults should be sleeping in the same beds with children, unless it's their own children who are, say, afraid of the dark or something, and they want to sleep between mommy and daddy. That's fine.
Right.
But it's a boundary violation. And there's also some other, putting on my psychiatrist hat again here, there's also some other issues that concern me. A few children reported that what he would do was he would talk with them for a few hours, treat them like they were his best friend, then he would get bored with them. So there were some subtle boundary violations there too. Somewhere, I'll say in his own way, I mean, he really did love children, and I hope to God none of the things that were alleged really did happen. And I think the drugs hurt him too. Drugs will do that to you. I mean, ever since he burned his hair, and this was in the 80s, I believe he had a drug problem, and that could have affected his judgment as well, and could have led to him showing extremely poor judgment.
Right. Well, I tell you what, Gary, before we get into anything else, because we're almost right here at the midway point, we'll go and take the break. And while we get ready to go to the break, a question which you should be thinking about is, you heard it said that basically Michael Jackson was a kid with money. So be thinking about that, and we'll get into that as soon as we come back. So all those tuning in, don't go anywhere. More with Dr. Gary Frick. You are listening to Shadows in the Dark, broadcasting live at shadowsinthedarkradio.com and Dark Plains Radio at darkplainsradio.com. The show can also be heard as a rebroadcast at ParaX at para-x.com and available as a podcast at Black Vault Radio at blackvaultradio.com and Planet Paranormal at planetparanormal.com.
Have you been wondering what gift to get that special person in your life? Then you need to visit Mountain View Candle Works, your one-stop headquarters for candles, fountains, specialty foods, and much more. Just visit www.mountainviewcandleworks.com. We make your candles with mountain care.
More than just another New Age journal, Mysteries Magazine provides a thought-provoking, in-depth look into myths, magic, and the paranormal, as well as the mysteries which have intrigued both historians and scientists from the beginning of time. So subscribe today by visiting www.mysteriesmagazine.com or pick up a copy at select newsstands throughout the U.S. and Canada. Again, that was www.mysteriesmagazine.com. Challenge your beliefs.
Are you wondering if the path that you've chosen is the right one for you? Or would you like to see a glimpse of what the future may hold? Tarot may be able to help you understand better the path that you're on. The cards don't lie, nor do they lead you astray, as they're a vehicle for messages from God, angels, and guides. Have your cards read for you by world-renowned tarot card master Scotty Roberts. To schedule a private reading with Scotty, visit www.tarottbyscotty.com today and find out what the cards may hold for you.
Ready for some rollicking adventure? In Scotty Roberts' book, The Rollicking Adventures of Tam O'Hare, join Irish Rabbit, Tam O'Hare, and his young squirrel squire, Horatio McNutt, as they journey through Scotland of the mid-1500s seeking a small child who's been stolen by the fairy folk. Crafty raccoon pirates, conniving noble wolves, conflicted royal foxes, and self-serving religious badgers all stand in the way as their quest brings them headlong into high seas action and supernatural intrigue. The Rollicking Adventures of Tam O'Hare is in bookstores everywhere and at barnesandnoble.com. This hardcover, lushly illustrated chapter book is the first book in the Tam O'Hare series. But hang on to your sabers. Book 2, Tam O'Hare and the Banshee of Ballyglenmorrow, is coming later this year. So swash your buckle and prepare yourself for a historically rollicking, swaggeringly supernatural adventure. Visit TamO'Hare.com to learn more. You'll never trust a raccoon with a sword again.
Hello everybody, this is Mr. G from the World Paranormal Society and from Haunt the Hunters on DarkPlainsRadio.com. I would like to tell you about a website. It's called TreasureForAllUSA.com, where I got everything from knickknacks to complete DVR systems. A place where you can shop for everything and everything, and if we don't have it, I'll find it for you. That's again, TreasureForAllUSA.com, everything from DVR systems, TV sets, knickknacks, and gifts for loved ones. Come check it out, TreasureForAllUSA.com. You won't be disappointed.
Well, we are talking with Dr. Gary Frick tonight about the life and death of Michael Jackson. As we went to the break there, Gary, I kind of gave you a question to be thinking about, and that was, a lot of people have said that Michael was really a kid, mentally, really a child with a lot of money. I mean, you take Neverland. It was an amusement park. This kind of was the persona that he gave a little bit of. Do you find that to be true?
Yes. Now the question is that a good thing? And well, there's now getting spiritual about it. There's a common belief that God particularly loves children. I do believe that to be true, but then again, adults exist for a reason too. In fact, Jesus and Buddha reached enlightenment when he was 35. Jesus began his ministry when he was 29. God loves children, but he wants us all to grow up too. The paradox in all religions is it's okay to be childlike. It's great to love children. It's great to have a good rapport with children. But to want to be a child and to be a 50-year-old man or a 40-year-old man, that's just not good. And once again, I know this keeps coming up again and again, but I think the drugs didn't help.
Right.
Supposedly he had a lot of friendships, but no friendship was strong enough to really sit him down and convince him to stop taking these drugs or these medications. And that's the choice of the person. If a person's addicted to drugs, it's their choice to stop anyway. But anyway, I know I'm getting a little off the subject, but in a way I'm not. I think the drugs really hurt. In fact, there's a philosophy in psychiatry that say if you're 50 years old and you've been on drugs ever since you were 25, that's 25 years of growing that have really come to a halt. So emotionally, you're still 25. You see what I mean?
Right. So it could have been really the drugs could have kept him in this childlike state of mind.
Yes, and once again, I mean, I work with children in the afternoon. You could say I'm a child psychiatrist. I spend about half of my time with children. I mean, I love kids. My office is like one big toy store. You know, it's okay to love kids, but I think now back to what we said before, and now I'm putting my psychoanalytic hat on, really. He had boundary problems. There was something wasn't right. An adult should not want, I'm not going to say adults should not want to be friends with kids. I think it's fine if you are, but, and it's fine to want to live in the child's world to a point, but somehow I think with Michael Jackson it got self-destructive. And you know, I want to say something on behalf of Michael Jackson. I have no way of knowing this for sure. All I could do was base it on intuition and from what I've seen. I get the feeling he was a really good father.
Right.
I get the feeling he probably disciplined his kids like he was supposed to. I have no way of knowing this for sure, once again. But what's sad about his death is if he had lived 20 more years, I'll bet you his kids would have grown up to say, hey, I had a great dad. And that's kind of what happened at his funeral. The 12-year-old said, a lesson to be learned from this is it's great to love kids, but we all have to grow up sometime.
Right. Well, let's kind of want to get in one more thing, and then switch gears a little bit, and let's kind of get into Jackson making contact with you and the 20 pages that he has written through you. And what I want to talk about first is what is the overall effect of his death on society today? I mean, obviously, it's been joked about, but it is the truth that you could have committed a heinous crime and no one would know because the news has done nothing but covered Michael Jackson ever since his death. I mean, everything has been trumped by that.
You know, this was actually addressed in my writing, and Michael Jackson actually replied to what I said. When I think of some of the so-called great people who died in the past 50 years or so, President Kennedy with all his women, John Lennon with the drugs, though he did a lot of good things too. The drugs was obviously not good. With every supposedly great person who died, we could think of something. But with Michael Jackson, that's different. I mean, if those allegations were actually true, that goes into a different category. Whatever he was accused of doing, but we don't know for sure if it happened. You see, and I'm going to put my psychiatrist hat on again. One thing I was taught when I did my psychiatry residency is ambivalence can make grieving a lot more difficult. So, for example, if you had a parent who died and you had a very bad relationship with them, it could be a lot more difficult when they die than if it was either one way or the other. Because after they die, then the conflicts or your mixed feelings about them can't really be resolved. Like I've known people who had really bad relationships with their father, say, and then their father dies and they almost feel relieved. And I've had people with really good relationships with their and it's hard to lose somebody you had a good relationship with, but if it was a really healthy relationship, then if you had a really healthy relationship with your parents, they would have taught you coping mechanisms along the way anyway.
Right.
But anyway, a free association I'm trying to make, and I hope you all connect with it, is one of the reasons why we are mourning Michael Jackson so much, or why so many people are, I'll speak for a billion people, I believe, who saw his funeral,
right,
is there's so much ambivalence there. We don't know what happened, whether the charges were actually true, and B, even if they weren't true, once again, he showed extremely poor judgment, And I remember after he died, and once again, and that's another reason, obviously, he mourned. He's one of the greatest entertainers who ever lived. I don't think there's any argument there. Is I remember I'd be listening to his music, I'd be saying, man, I just wish that those few things didn't happen. You know what I mean? I wish there were no allegations. And then he would be like, I'm overstating myself when I say this, but I mean, he's done some things that are pretty saintly, and you've addressed this already. You know, he's opened people's minds towards higher consciousness. He's been an advocate of world peace. He's given to charity. By the way, some people in the chat room have said that he wasn't perfect, even as far as that's concerned. Somebody suggested he might have been anti-Semitic or something. I don't know. Well, one thing's for sure: he was human. John Lennon was human. Elvis Presley was human. Even Mother Teresa. We could talk a lot about her on another show, but she wasn't perfect either, believe it or not. But yeah, the as we talked about before, it does bother me when I see what extremely poor judgment he showed in those cases with the kids and the allegations and the sleeping with the kids in the same bed.
Right.
And you know what? One thing, the way I advertised this show to friends and people I know is I said, we're going to talk about Michael Jackson, the good, the bad, the ugly, and the spiritual. Or maybe I should have said the great, the bad, and the ugly. But, you know, I like getting real, and I'm glad that we covered all angles of this situation.
Well, I think everybody's life could fit into that description. We've all done good, great things for people, whether recognized or not. We've all done bad things to people, you know, whether they were close to us or not. And we all have, at least I believe, we all have a spiritual side. So, you know, it comes down, for me personally, comes down to, you know, why should I judge this man when, you know, maybe I haven't done the exact same things that he has or been accused of, but I have done wrong things in my life as well. Again, just like you said, we're human, we're not perfect, and people make mistakes. But, you know, I mean, we can't deny the fact that it had a huge impact on literally billions of people. I mean, look, just like I said, again, look at the news, the way they covered it. Look at, you know, the funeral. Look at the, you know, worldwide this was recognized. He did make a positive change in many people's lives, and you know, one thing, he's in the Guinness Book of World Records, donating to the most charities. You know, so you know, he did do great things.
Yeah, and that what impresses me, is the worldwide appeal that he had. I knew he had it, but after he passed away, all over the world. Well, that brings us to the spiritual, the part that some people I know have been waiting for, and some people haven't. I mean, I know I've been on the show before. Once again, everybody, I mean, this will be my 6th book on spiritual communication. I've been doing this for a long time, and Martin Luther King has written books, chapters through me. Abraham Lincoln has written chapters through me. Even Archangel Gabriel has written chapters through me, but that book hasn't been released yet. That's in the future sometime. And it just so happens that Michael Jackson from the afterlife had decided to write through me, and he communicated with me. And somewhere he maybe got permission too. Well, whatever it is, it somehow something clicked. And I got 20 written pages here. I guess what I'll do is I'll just let you all know wherever he is, he's doing okay. I'd say he's doing well, actually. He feels that he's pleased with the fact that he opened people's minds to more global consciousness, and he made his contributions to world peace. And But he also said that he sees things a lot more clearly than he did as a person. I think he sees how money and power and fame and that sort of thing could corrupt a person. He knew that when he was human, but I think he sees it more clearly now. He still has that great childlike sense of humor. You know what happens when somebody who you know, I didn't even know him personally, but I knew a little about him. When somebody you know communicates with you from the afterlife, usually your reaction will be, wow, that person is more, like in my father's case, his name was Don Frick. When he communicates with me, I feel like saying sometimes that's more Don Frick than when he was actually Don Frick.
Right.
It's like, but Michael Jackson still has that childlike innocence in the afterlife, and he's very playful. He knows when to get serious, though, too. And he admits that he made his share of mistakes as Michael Jackson. He says he will have to live another lifetime after this one. He did say that. And he also said that, I even asked him, are you going to be famous in your next lifetime? Rich and famous, and he didn't really give me a straight answer. But another issue that was discussed in these 20 chapters 20 pages, is we even talked a little about the entertainment world as it is now. And once again, we even talked about American Idol a little bit, how in the span of 1 hour so many hearts are broken. Right. And he gave me a speech about how if only you people knew how loved you were from the afterlife, you wouldn't be so concerned about succeeding in the world. What happens is when we're kids, we're given subtle messages from our families and friends and so on and so forth that we're only okay if we make so much money, if we succeed, if we're this, if we're that. He said, but if you all had any idea how special you all were and how much we love you and how much God loves you, you wouldn't even really desire these things that much. I mean, some people, for whatever reason, are meant to be rich and famous, and one of the lessons we're actually supposed to learn from them, I think, is they're not really any happier than anybody else. But I even mentioned the fact that some people that I've noticed there are a lot of people out there with talent who are not recognized. I admit I learned that partly from watching reality shows, but I've looked around me. I've even heard a story about a person who people swear sang better than Frank Sinatra, but he never made it big. And I said, isn't it tough though to go through life with talent but without an audience? And Michael Jackson, and then he said, but you just don't understand how loved you actually are, and it's a shame. And I get the feeling that wherever Michael Jackson is, he feels the unconditional love. And the way one thing he says is every ounce, every minute of love and selfless acts of love that you give to other people do have a tremendous significance, and you will take them with you to the afterlife. And he did admit that during his life as Michael Jackson, he showed extremely poor judgment, and I think he understands the damage that the drugs did too.
Yeah. Well, now let me ask you one question. I want to get to some of the questions coming through the chat room. But so would this, you say he said that he would have to live another lifetime. So is this a healing process for him? The opportunity to, I guess, look back on his life, see the errors that he made, the greatness that he did do, and learn from those to come back and live another life.
Yeah, I guess you could say healing. From the other side, it's viewed even more positively than that. It's viewed as an opportunity to love. The way he phrased it is, the way he phrases it, let me think, is he says that that he's going to come back and he's going to be even a greater light to the world than he was as Michael Jackson.
Huh.
And you know, it sounds like I'm nitpicking a little bit, but really I'm not, because from like the fifth dimension, for example, we're in the third dimension. In the fifth dimension, negativity as we know it does not have the same meaning as it does here. For example, hatred in the fifth dimension is viewed as lack of love. Mistakes are viewed as missed opportunities, or because time is experienced different, mistakes are viewed as, well, you learn from your mistakes, and you could be, as Michael Jackson put it, in even a greater light to the world than you were before. But that's how he doesn't really describe it as a healing process, or even karma is the universe is even more positive than that. It's more a I think a learning process works good here. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's get some of these questions in the chat room before they scroll out and I can't read them anymore. First one, let's take Night Owl's question. It says, do you feel people's personalities become more concentrated when they pass, like they sort of distill down to what they really are like?
Do they distill down to what they really are? Yes. In a positive way. Like, you know, I've had past life regressions myself. I've had one. I was a Greek philosopher. I very much believe this. And I also had a past life as a woman. I was a housewife, and I mean, in that life I was heterosexual, and in this life I'm a heterosexual man. I mean, so you know, one life affects the other, but not totally. We have egos in each life, but there is. My guess is from lifetime to lifetime. Actually, I know this to be true. There are things about me that are similar from lifetime to lifetime, and they're similar when I pass over to the after. There are certain things about me that I do believe, and as Michael Jackson himself put it when he wrote these 20 pages through me, all the love that you show on earth, you bring back with you. Well, all of us have our own individual spark of God within us. All of us have different ways of expressing that love, and that love, and the way we have of expressing that love, you could say that's our personality. That's our true personality right there. And to give you an example, my guess is no matter how many lifetimes Michael Jackson lives on earth, he'll always have a childlike way about him. That's my guess. He'll always be a bit on the sensitive side. In fact, I once even read a New Age book. It was channeled, too, by a fifth dimensional being was writing through this person. And they said one of the reasons Michael Jackson is the way he is because he's much more comfortable with female lifetimes than he is with male lifetimes. Now, this doesn't mean that Michael Jackson wanted to be a woman. I don't believe he was transsexual, but it means that there's something about him that resonates more with his female lifetimes than with his male lifetimes. And, but yeah, the answer to your question is yes. We do have personalities in the afterlife, and it's how we express our own individual spark of God.
I was told I was a wizard in my past life.
Okay. You were taught that?
No, I was told I was a... What was it? I think it was a wizard. Something along those lines. We had some past life readings on the show. I was told I was a wizard. I think it was. I'm sure the chat room cleared that up. But yeah.
well, you know what? I had a lifetime in the Middle Ages. I was a woman in that lifetime, and I was burnt at the stake. I was like 18 years old. And I will say one thing. I mean, today, people like me, and people have different attitudes about the paranormal. Some people think we're a little wacky, and that's about it, right? But if you go back to the Middle Ages, it was worse than being a little weird. You were burnt at the stake, and If you were a wizard in a past life, I'm not doing a reading now, but if it's true, it wouldn't surprise me. Let's put it that way.
Well, yeah, they're confirming that. Yes, it was a wizard, actually an alchemist. I remember them. Yeah, Rochelle saying that I was an alchemist as well, or interested in alchemy.
You know what? I actually resonate with that even more than the part about your being a wizard, because no, what it is you're very open to the paranormal, obviously, but you also have a well-grounded way about you too, which allows you to do a show in which you get different people listening to you. Some people are skeptical, others aren't. And alchemists, I don't know too much about them, but these are people who are open to the metaphysical and the spiritual, but they're also scientific as well.
Right.
So I could actually resonate with you. That would actually be a good past life for me too, because look at the way I am in this life. I'm a mild-mannered psychiatrist by day, and by night I'm a super doctor who talks to the spirit of Michael Jackson.
Well, you just couldn't picture me in a pointy hat. That's all it is.
Oh wow! Now, oh, please don't get me started on that. Then maybe I will have to do a reading, and I'm not in that frame of mind now.
Well, let's get Bambi's question in before we get way off topic there. Of me being a wizard, as some people saying a lizard in the chat room.
But actually, Jeremiah, I do say I don't think we're really getting off topic, though.
No, not really. No,
because we're talking. You know, one of the reasons people tuned in is they want to hear what's Michael Jackson up to now that he's passed over, and I'm trying to teach or remind everybody that there are certain elements to us that will be part of us for eternity, and I guess you could call them personality.
Yeah. Well, Bambi's question is, did Michael Jackson when he contacted you, did he say anything about his memorial and what he thought about that?
That's a good question, and no, not specifically the memorial. He did address the fact that he's been getting so much attention. In fact, I even said in one of the chapters that I described the scenario, and I said, I'm watching the Today Show, and you're all there talking about. And there was, the way he explains it to me, that you would all be surprised when you all pass over into the afterlife, an overwhelming majority of you'll be surprised at how quickly you acclimate to your new environment. Or if you ever communicate with beings in the afterlife. I mean, I've had beings communicate with me, and I'll be told they're new arrivals, which means they just passed over into the afterlife. And I'll be amazed at how, I won't really feel that they're that human anymore. And I really feel that Michael Jackson, despite all the drugs and the imperfections, that he, for whatever reason, he passed over and he had a lot of help. And he describes it as sort of like and I kind of learned this when we were at Ripley's, a weekend pass. Mm-hmm. And he said that kind of applies to, it's kind of like sometimes spirits in the afterlife, they will visit a particular person at a particular time for a reason, and they're willing to take on their old identity to a point. But not so much that there was a bit of detachment on his part, because we know that if Michael Jackson were just like a zombie, like in Thriller, he were walking around like a zombie, and he were able to see what his funeral and everything, he'd be crying and saying, "Oh, I love you all. Oh, this is so great." And he did do that actually, but it was a little more subdued. He has to keep his detachment, and but he's preparing for his next life. And he very much appreciates what I'm doing, and I even addressed those issues we discussed with his boundary problems and his poor judgment, and he said, "Yeah, I showed extremely poor judgment, and he's looking at his life objectively. And interestingly, one question I asked him, and he complimented me and said it was a very good question, is did the fact that you were one of the greatest entertainers who ever lived, did it help you in the afterlife? Does it help you? And he said, yeah, basically he said, wow, let's see, he basically complimented me. He said it was a good question, and he said, anything I did that contributes to the love of the world, I've brought with me here. So the answer to your question is yes. My entertainment was part of who I am. It was, a lot of it had relevance to world peace and that sort of thing. But he said, I want you all to know, though, that the fact that I was so rich and famous, and even perhaps one of the greatest entertainers who ever lived, that does not excuse some of the mistakes I made. Right. I can see my mistakes, once again, mistakes is kind of using a word loosely, but he said the mistakes I made he basically said there's something I have to work on, and he says he describes his life as Michael Jackson. Now that he's passed over, he describes it as almost like a blur, like it happened in a few minutes. Mm-hmm. And what happens is, as we've talked about before, Jeremiah, we've talked about near-death experiences before. Right. People pass over into the afterlife, and then they go through a tunnel, and then they see their whole life before them in a flash of time. I believe Michael Jackson went through all that, only the difference is he didn't come back. Right. So he saw his whole life in one flash of time, and he also saw how every moment where there was genuine love, he brought with him to the afterlife. And but Frank Sinatra did write a few chapters through me before too, and he basically said the same thing, that he appreciates entertainment, but there's he said there are things that are perhaps even more important than that, and we're getting towards the 1.5 hour mark, Jeremiah. That's when I get a little tongue-tied. Excuse me, everybody. But basically, Michael Jackson is really doing a lot of soul-searching now that he's passed over in the afterlife.
Well, I got a couple more questions from the chat. Another one from Bambi that apparently scrolled out on my site here, asking, do you know if the number of lives corresponds with Western astrology, according to the theory that Pisces, like her, are on their last and 12th life?
Well, the way I view astrology is every lifetime you have a different astrological chart. Bambi, please respond to what I'm saying if you disagree with me. But I believe what happens is you pass over into the afterlife. There are certain lessons you still need to learn, and Michael Jackson, I believe, is aware of them now. That there are certain things he needs to learn, and he and his guides in the afterlife will seek another reincarnation, and he'll choose the circumstances he's born under, and the time and the place he's born, and the astrological chart. I believe they vary from lifetime to lifetime. For example, my lifetime in ancient Greece and the Middle Ages and Holland in the early 1900s or late 1800s, those lifetimes, I believe I had a different astrological chart than I have in this lifetime. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So okay. I believe that answers the question, but I don't know what his astrological chart will look like in his next life.
All right. Well, here's a question from Sky, also in the chat room. Do you know how long between lives?
I get the idea that Michael Jackson he's really planning his next lifetime now. I mean, sometimes when people pass over in the afterlife, 1,000 years could go by before they have another lifetime, and this is kind of a complicated subject. But
right.
with Michael Jackson, I don't know for sure, but I wouldn't be surprised if he reincarnated within the next few decades. That's just what I'm seeing. That's what I'm sensing. He's really into that. He's really being introspective about the life he just lived, and he's really planning for his next life. You even hear sometimes that when people pass over into the afterlife, they kind of go on a vacation for a while. In fact, Edgar Casey was such a person, and I know his son was on your show. He passed over, and he needed a long break because the lifetime he lived took a lot out of him. Being a medium is not always easy. You're dealing with various different energies and all that. But with Michael Jackson, I think he's up and about. He's the good news to all of you Michael Jackson fans is he's when all is said and done, he's doing fine.
Good. Now, what have you been told through those who have written through you? What is time like on the other side? Is it non-existent? Is it just move by quicker at a lot? Like say, is 1,000 days like a day to us?
I would say somewhere between the two extremes, but closer to it not existing. Let me tell you all an experience my mother had, and she has my abilities to a point, but then again, there is very much something to be said about the fact that we're all psychic, and we all have the ability to communicate with the afterlife to a point. We just don't use those abilities or acknowledge them. And anyway, for those of you who don't really follow me, just pay attention to your dreams sometimes. If you dream about somebody who's passed over, it may not be just a dream. Anyway, my mother was sitting by the ocean where my father's where we threw my father's ashes, and I remember she almost talked to my father in a sense, like the same way a person might talk to a tombstone. You know what I mean? She said, "Well done. It's been 3 years," and she felt she got a clear message from my father, and that message was it could have been 3 years or it could have been 3,000 years. So yeah, on the other side, and so the question is, what practical value does that have? What practical value does that have to know that time is ultimately an illusion? Well, it helps us see the big picture. It helps to see. I mean, if you all look back at your childhoods and your young adulthoods and your life, if you understand that time is an illusion, it could better help you understand how everything you've experienced in your life has a purpose. Your whatever families that God chose for you, or you chose when you were in the after, whatever family you have now, your parents were there for a purpose. Whatever jobs you had, there was a higher purpose behind them, and it's like your whole life is one entity. It's not just a series of seconds or minutes or hours. It's one continuum. And when you pass over into the afterlife, in one flash of time, you'll actually get to see the entire life you just lived. You'll get to see the big picture. And just by understanding that, I believe that it just helps you see things from a more spiritual perspective. And by the way, I want to say something now. I know a lot of people like me will talk about these things as if we really know what we're talking about. Don't let us totally fool you. I am nobody out there. Nobody, no matter how smart or spiritually developed they act, can totally relate to what it's like to be physically dead. I will say this: I hear a lot of people, even people who call themselves mystics, say that well, you don't know for sure that there's an afterlife. That's not true. I do know for sure there's an afterlife. I know I will still be a conscious being after I die, and I know there's a God. I mean, these are things I'm 100% sure of.
Mm-hmm.
But things such as what is time really like, and I mean, Albert Einstein spent his entire life thinking about these things, and
Right.
he could only come up with so much, and he died before he could come up with the grand unification theory, and I'm not sure if it would have said all that much anyway.
All right. Well, I've got another question. This is from Crystal, hanging out in the chat room there. And her question is, why do some spirits stay earthbound when they can go to the light? What is it that keeps their attachments on the earth plane?
Well, I will say that for a spirit to really be totally earthbound is very rare. There are several things. There are several different types of visitations. One is, the most common is, a person passes over into the afterlife, and then they visit the earth for a purpose. That's what Michael Jackson did with me. That was one category. He's not an earthbound spirit. He knows he's dead. He knows he's no longer a physical being, and he spoke with me and wrote through me for the betterment of humanity. And then there's another category of being who may have some unresolved issues, but that doesn't mean that they're earthbound. It's like, for example, with all of you, we all have some unresolved issues from our childhood. So all of us are still living our childhood, even as adults. But that doesn't mean we're totally locked in our childhood either. See, I believe that explains some what are considered earthbound spirits. It's just beings who more or less have passed over into the afterlife, but there's still some issues they're trying to work on, and they haven't totally broken away yet.
Mm-hmm.
And then there is the category, and this does happen, of sometimes people, when they pass over, they don't even realize they're dead. That does happen. And even when that happens, believe it or not, there's some sort of purpose behind it. If you all ever saw the movie The Sixth Sense, if you're all wondering about this topic, I highly recommend that movie, The Sixth Sense. It was a great movie. Actually, ironically, the child star in that movie was a good friend of Michael Jackson's when he was a child.
Right.
And Bruce Willis is in that movie. And what happens is, it is true. Bruce Willis gets shot. And wow, I shouldn't really give you the... I'm kind of giving you all the punchline of the movie.
It's an old movie. I'm sure most have watched it.
But okay, could I give him the punchline, or
Go
not
for
the punchline? Okay, what happened is he didn't realize he was dead at first,
Right.
and he didn't realize he was dead until the end of the movie. But then we find out that the whole time he didn't realize he was dead, there was a purpose behind it. He somehow grew from the experience, and then he moved on. Oh, the television show Medium with Jennifer Love Hewitt. Same thing. All these people that, first of all, earthbound spirits are very rare, but when it does happen, eventually they go towards the light, and they're shown how even when they were earthbound, there was somehow a purpose behind it. And I'm not, well, I mean, I wouldn't want that to happen to me, but you know what, I would say when it comes to the afterlife, there's really nothing for us to fear. You all have none of us really have any concept of how forgiving and how loving the higher planes are. And in fact, even a particularly bad person who's done a lot of bad things in their life, usually there's some spiritual progression to their life, and that's at least appreciated from the afterlife. Anyway, I hope that answers your question.
All right, I got another question coming from Calvin Coolidge in the chat room, wanting to know what
Silent Cal.
Yeah, what is your concept of God? Amen. Sitting on a cloud, or does it refer to a God energy, or is God a spirit too?
Wow, actually, these are actually some of my favorite types of questions. You know, when I first started trying to write books, I actually just tried to write straight philosophical books about God and how God relates to religion, and how, in some case, religion misunderstands it. And you know, it's interesting. The word God and the word Tao are synonymous. Yet, if you use that word, either one of those words, people have almost a totally different impression of both of them. Yeah, God is obviously not sitting on a cloud and looking down on the earth, but He truly is all knowing and all present. And I mean, to say that God, He or She, is all knowing it actually in some ways undermines the fact that it's not even a matter of Him knowing anything. He's with us all the time. He's contained within everything. It's even more profound than that. And is He an energy? Yes. I mean, I would think that it's better to think of God as energy, or you could say a being of clear light, than it would be to think of Him as obviously, as we said before, sitting on a cloud looking down on earth. But right. You know, I'm surprised I'm even about to bring this up, but once again in my next book, where Archangel Gabriel writes some things through me, I get a better idea of what God's like when He writes through me. Archangel Gabriel isn't God, but he God is a spirit. That answers, he is a spirit, but He has a tremendous understanding of the human condition because He's with us at all times.
Now, what in Michael Jackson's communications with you, what was his final, thought that he gave you, his final reason that he really visited, or I guess his message? What was the message he really wanted to get out there?
Let me think what the best way to... right here he says, Gary, let me say that... This is the last thing he wrote through me. Let me just read the last paragraph he wrote through me.
Okay.
He said, Gary, let me say that if you people had any idea of how much love for you exists on the other side, as you call it, then you would never feel inferior again to anybody. You wouldn't worry. You wouldn't experience resentment. If people treated you unkindly, you'd view that as an opportunity to love, because I guarantee you all, that every ounce, every second of love experienced on earth, you will bring with you to the afterlife. Absolutely, positively. Your love will live on and on and on. Actually, that's really his take-home. His take-home message, more so than, hey, here I am, Michael Jackson, is, look, you are so incredibly loved, not only by me, but by many other beings as well, including the good Lord, Him or herself. And that's really the take-home message. He really, let me see, here in the first chapter, he writes through me, he's asking everybody for a group hug, and how about a group hug, everybody? A worldwide hug. Let's heal the world and make it a better place. The time has come to stop talking and start doing. How does that sound, everybody? It doesn't matter if you're black or white, red or yellow, pale white like I was. Ha 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 ha. Oh dear. This really is a thrill for me, let me tell you, Dr. Frick. The great Michael Jackson is on stage yet again. And as long as you all connect with my healing messages of light and love, there will be no boundary violations here, people. Come on, everybody. How about a worldwide hug? Lord knows you all still need it. You don't understand how I feel now. I'd really like to reach out to you all right now. Actually, I'm doing just that. You may not feel it, you may not experience it, but here I am, like it or not. And then he sticks out his tongue. He does that a lot in these chapters. He sticks out his tongue and he goes, nah, 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 nah. No, seriously, people. For those of you who don't believe I'm for real, I love you all too. I believe that's an important aspect of love. Love and acknowledge those who could only love you so much. He then puts his thumbs in his ears and waves in a childish manner. And he goes, and so everybody, nah, 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 nah. You thought I was gone, and yet I'm still here. Not alive and physically kicking, but still alive just as you are. All of you. I'm not kidding. That really is how I experience you all, as beings of pure light and love. You absolutely, positively cannot convince me otherwise. If any of you put yourself down, I am ready to build you up, for I know of nothing else but to support you all for the beautiful beings that you are. And then it goes on from there, and he talks about mankind is headed towards an evolutionary leap. He says, I have confidence in you all, and he throws a kiss. And with this chapter, he says, until we meet again, everybody, you know it seems so ridiculous for me to say that. I am always with all of you. You are always with me, and we are always with God. Amen to that, brothers and sisters. And he gets, and you know what I really like about the chapters he wrote through me? He talks about, love and how much he loves us and how much we need to love each other and stuff that people consider idealistic. But he gets real with me too.
Right.
In fact, in one of the last chapters, I believe it was the second to last chapter he wrote through me, I basically said to him, look, and I even talked about his personal life. I said, look, whatever it is, there's billions of people out there, as imperfect as you were, we just can't find it in our hearts to really hate you, or it's really hard even to dislike you. And he basically said, thank you, Dr. Frick, that was beautiful. And he said, thank you for keeping things real. And he said, I really appreciate this opportunity. And once again, actually, after he said, and thank you for keeping things real, here I found it. He said, I hope to meet some of you in my next lifetime, and we'll continue to spread the message of universal peace and love, and hopefully next time around, I'll be an even greater medium for God's love than I was before. So that's what I was trying to say before. That's how he phrased it. A greater medium for God's love than I was before. And let me say, one thing he doesn't have to be famous either. There's a lot of subtlety. And this is something my spiritual guides have tried to teach me too. Somehow, the way our society is set up, we kind of feel like the more people who listen to us, the more powerful our message is. I think that's partly the way our society sets up. How do we elect our president? Well, whoever gets the most votes. Who makes the most money when they write a book or make a movie? Well, the people who get the most, people who buy the most books or watch the movie the most. But when you're looking at things from a higher level of reality, somehow it's explained to me. In the afterlife, they kind of say, and there's a lot of free association when beings from the afterlife communicate with me. They'll use terms such as domino effect and trickle-down effect, and so it's almost like in the movie It's a Wonderful Life. One life touches the other in ways we can't relate to. And that movie, I'll assume you all saw it. It's probably the most popular movie there ever was. I look back at my life. I wonder what would it have been like without me in it, and I really don't know. I mean, I want you all to know. I hope my messages that from the radio shows I've been on and my books have reached out to some of you. And from the afterlife, quality is more important than quantity. In fact, there's a story about the Buddha. He was sitting on a hill, and there were, I believe, thousands of people below him, ready for him to give a speech or say something profound. And he started meditating for a little while, and then he held up a flower, and And I think what happened is the people down below didn't get it. They were like, okay, what's going on here? Why don't the Buddha say something? And a few people in the audience basically jumped up and down, or they got all excited, and they said, I get it. Buddha was saying that there is more life in a flower than anything that could be said in words. I get it. And they became his disciples. And so he reached out just to a few people, but it was quality, not quantity. And he was supposedly the great Buddha, who supposedly is supposed to come back in this century. I believe that's what the Buddhists say. I'm not sure. I'm not really sure if we should care either. I'm not sure if Buddha would want us to care. I mean, the bottom line is, if the Buddha returns, it's to spread the message of love and peace. We don't need a Buddha for that. We could all follow our inner promptings and do it ourselves. Mm-hmm. And with the Buddha's help would be nice too.
Well, Gary, we are unfortunately out of time. I know we could keep going, but before we say our goodbyes to you, let us know what your website is, where your books are available, as well as when we can expect Is There Music in the Afterlife?
Yes. My website is drgaryfrick.com. And Is There Music in the Afterlife? I'll say a few months. And I'm telling you, for those of you Michael Jackson fans, if you read the book just for the Michael Jackson chapters, you will not regret it. I mean, if you have any appreciation for the fact that there might be that there is an afterlife, I won't even say might be, you will read this and say, "Wow, that is Michael Jackson." And the same was true, say, when Martin Luther King wrote through me. And there's a progression to each of these books, and there's an underlying, this is my sixth book, and basically I think the main issue is world peace. We got to put even more emphasis on it than we did before, and it also helps to know, obviously, that there is a God and there is an afterlife, but peace, and God bless Michael Jackson for his contribution to world peace, and he's still working on that issue even from the afterlife. That's another thing I didn't mention. Wherever Michael Jackson is, he is still trying to make his own contributions to humanity, such as writing through me. Anything else I didn't address?
No, I think you covered everything pretty well there.
Okay, drgaryfrick.com.
Mm-hmm.
And feel free to send me an email, everybody. My email address is on my website. If you have any questions or anything you'd like to know, I thank all of you for listening this far, and it's been a real pleasure for me. I can't emphasize that enough.
Well, Gary, we always love having you on the show, and definitely a lot of thanks coming from the chat room for being here tonight. So it's always a pleasure having you on. I look forward to doing many, many shows with you in the future as well.
Oh, yeah, right back to you.
All right. Well, Gary, you have a good night, and we will talk to you soon.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, well, that was Dr. Gary Frick. Always such a pleasure to have on the show. Do check out his website, and his books are available in our store as well, shadowsindarkradio.com. Just click on the store link. We have most of them there, and matter of fact, I think you get one free with every one that you purchase, so not a bad deal at all. I think they're only $8 a piece, something along those lines. But again, always a pleasure having Gary on the show. So we want to thank him for coming. Especially thanks to all those who joined us tonight in the chat room and those who are going to join us on the archives. We always appreciate that. So join us this Thursday as we talk with Marie D. Jones and Larry Flaxman, and we're going to talk about the time prompt phenomenon. This deals with things along the lines of 11:11. Do you wake up in the middle of the night or in the mornings or afternoons or whatever and see the same numbers on the clock? And this a certain number seem to surround you all in aspects of your life. So it's going to be very, very interesting. I've been reading the book. It's a great book, so don't miss that. That is Thursday, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time. So we'll see everyone then. And again, thanks for listening. This has been Shadows in the Dark, where the darkness is illuminated. Good night, everyone.
Shadows in the dark, 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 dark.